Hi guys, for today's video, by the way, my name is John Sinaraha, 12 Hermes, and let's talk about my favorite subject. This is mathematics, and our topic for today's video, this is quadratic equations. Objectives of quadratic equations. Students will learn how to correctly use the formula to find a solutions to a quadratic equations. Students will explore the relationships between equations that can be solved by both the quadratic formula and factoring. Students will learn that the quadratic formula is more efficient when solving most real-life problems. The contents. What is a quadratic equations? How to use the quadratic formula? And how to solve quadratic equations? How to graph a quadratic equation, solving a quadratic equation by graphing practice questions. Quadratic formula and explanations and examples. By now, you know how to solve quadratic equations by methods such as completing the squares, the difference of a squares, and the perfect squares trinomial formula. And what is a quadratic equations? So, a quadratic equations in mathematics is defined as a polynomials of a second degree whose standards forms is ex squared plus bx plus c equals 0, where e, b, and c are numerical coefficients and e does not equal to 0. The term second degree means that at least one term in the equations is raised to the power of 2. In a quadratic equations, the variable x is an unknown value for which we need to define the solution. When the discriminant value is 0, then the equations will have only one roots or solutions. And if a discriminant is negative, then the quadratic equation has no real root. The above two values of x are known as roots of the quadratic equations, that the roots of quadratic equations depends on the nature of the discriminant. This discriminant is part of the quadratic formula in the form of b squared negative 4ac. A quadratic equation has two different real roots of the discriminant. The presence of the plus and minus in the quadratic formula implies that there are two solutions such as x1 equals negative b plus square root b2 negative 4ac and 2an. X squared plus bx and e equals negative c and a. Expressed as a perfect square, x squared plus bx and a plus b and 2a squared equals negative c and a plus b and 2x squared. X plus b and 2x squared equals 4ac plus bx squared and 4a squared and x plus b 2a and equals negative and positive square root of negative 4ac plus b squared equals 2a. X equals negative b and 2a and positive and negative square root b and squared negative 4ac and 2a. X equals negative b and positive and negative square root b squared negative 4ac and 2a. This is the quadratic formula. How to use the quadratic formula? So, suppose ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 is our standard quadratic equation. We can derive the quadratic formula by completing the square as shown below. Isolate the term c to the right side of the equations. Ax squared plus bx equals negative c. Divide each term by a. Examples of quadratic equations are 6x squared plus 11x negative 35 equals 0, and 2x squared negative 4x and 4x negative 2 equals 0, 2x squared negative 64 and equals 0, and x squared negative 16 equals 0, and x squared negative 7x equals 0, and 2x squared plus 8x equals 0, and etc. From these examples, you can note that some quadratic equations lack the term c and box bx. And there are the other sample and explanation for quadratic equations. Questions number 1. What is a quadratic equation? A polynomial which has the highest degree equal to 2 is a quadratic equation which are expressed in the form of ex squared plus bx plus c equals 0, where x and the variable and ebc are the real numbers and e does not equal to 0. And number 2 questions. What are the examples of quadratic equations? The example of quadratic equations are 5x squared negative x plus 6 equals 0, and x squared plus 8x plus 2 equals 0. Negative x squared plus 6x plus 18 equals 0. And x squared negative 4 equals 0. Number 3 questions. What is the formula for quadratics? The formula to find the solution of quadratic equation is x equals negative b, positive and negative square root b2 and negative 4ac and 2a. Number 4 questions. What are the methods to solve the quadratic equations? There are basically 4 methods to find the solution of quadratic equation. First is factorizations. Second is square roots property. And third, completing the squares. And 4, using the quadratic formula. And number 5 questions. What are the roots of the quadratic equations? The roots of quadratic equations are nothing but the solution for a 2-degree polynomials. Since the degree of a quadratic equation is 2, therefore, there will be roots or the solution for the equations. The formula to find the 2 roots of equations ex squared plus bx plus c equals 0 are x1 equals negative b plus square root b2 negative 4ac and 2a, and x number 2 equals negative b and negative square root bx and negative 4ac and 2a. And number 6 questions. What are the zeros of the quadratic equations? The zeros of the quadratic equations are those values for which the polynomial of the equations in E left hand side of the ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 is equal to 0. There are also called roots of the. This is the other definition of quadratic equations, quadratic functions. In math, we define a quadratic equation as an equation of degree 2, meaning that the highest exponent of this function is 2. The standard of form of a quadratic is y equals ax and 2 plus bx plus c, where e, b, and c numbers and e cannot be 0. Examples of quadratic equations include all of these. The graph. Now let's see what this function generally look like when they are graphed. We will graph the quadratic y equals e and x and 2, which will give us a basis for all quadratic. When graph y equals x2 comes out like this. 2 solutions. An interesting thing about quadratic equations is that they can have up the 2 real solutions. Solutions are where the quadratic equals 0. Real solutions means that these solutions are not imaginary and are real numbers. Imaginary numbers are those numbers with an imaginary part. Why quadratics are important? So why are these types of equations important? They are important because for one, they deal with our most basic calculations of area. The area of a circle, for example, is calculated using the formula E equals P 2, which is a quadratic remembers you. So this is the beginning of the video. Also think of the curves that we see all around us. Lesson summary. So what you have learned? We learned that a quadratic equations and an equations of degree 2, the standard form of a quadratic is y equals ax and 2 plus bx plus c, where a, b, c are numbers and cannot be 0. That's all. Thank you. Bye.